Shalom everyone. The Sharm el-Sheikh ceasefire framework moves from podium to practice. We'll cover Trump's push for a Gaza peace council, the technocrat plan Egypt says is already ready to go, and why some leaders were left circling. Inside Gaza, Hamas's crackdown on viral clans and what it means for control on the ground, plus the hostage swap. What was returned, what wasn't, and what Israel says comes next. And across the region, Lebanon signals talks, Indonesia's visit stalls, and of course, Syrian visit to Russia. Let's get to it. Let's start with the Sharm peace talks. At Sharm el-Sheikh, Pakistan's Prime Minister opened with a sweeping endorsement of the summit and of President Trump, calling it one of the greatest days in our modern history, crediting Trump with bringing peace that saved millions, recommending him for a Nobel Peace Prize, and saying that the world would remember him as the one who stopped 8 wars. President Trump then laid out a governance concept for Gaza. He wants Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to join a peace council that would manage the Strip. He said the process has entered a second, harder stage, the day after, for which there is not yet agreement, and the sign-in that already happened, the ceasefire agreement that will be, is very comprehensive, specifying that it will include laws and regulations. This is their conceptual idea. After visiting Israel, Trump met el-Sisi in Sharm and publicly repeated his request for Sisi to join the Middle East Peace Council, a point he also raised at the Knesset. Al-Sisi responded that Trump is the only person who can bring peace to the Middle East and outlined practical next steps. Stabilize the ceasefire, move humanitarian aid into Gaza, and press for the release of Israeli hostages' bodies. A presidential memorandum, the Declaration of Trump for Peace and Sustainable Prosperity, dated October 13, 2025, set the framework. Endorsement of the agreement that ended more than 2 years of suffering, support for stable, sustainable peace for Palestinians and Israelis, a definition of peace that safeguards rights, security, and dignity, commitments to cooperation, dialogue, and respect for religious heritage, rejection of extremism, and a preference for diplomacy over force. It welcomed progress towards stable arrangements in Gaza, called for institution building, and committed to a future of stable and sustainable peace. The signatories were Donald J. Trump, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Tamim bin Hamad al-Thani, that is the Qatari emir, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is, of course, our Turkish friend, the president, former prime minister, and overall dictator of Turkey. During and after the sign-in, Trump praised mediators and regional leaders. He called the document, as mentioned, very comprehensive, saying it took 3,000 years and it will last. He told el-Sisi that Egypt was chosen to host, and Erdogan had been there when needed, and mentioned Emir's Qatar that the deal would not have happened without him. El-Sisi called the sign-in a historic moment and expressed hope that the Gaza war would be the region's last. Despite all that optimism, the optics around the summit were quite mixed. Israeli commentary said that the leaders at Sharm were kept waiting during Trump's roughly 90-minute Knesset speech and all kinds of other delays that happened. For example, the idea that Trump would go to a hospital to meet hostages. Trump himself joked that surely some of them have already left. Flight and attendance report added to that narrative. After Netanyahu was rumored to have been invited, since originally he was not invited, which is very odd considering Iran and the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas are invited. But anyways, it's kind of odd to not have Netanyahu, representative of Israel, be invited to this peace council. But anywho, after it was rumored that he was going to attend, Erdogan's plane reportedly circled over the Red Sea and only landed after Israel said Netanyahu would not arrive, indicating to us how friendly Erdogan is towards Israel and what a neutral side they are. Iraq's prime minister reportedly cancelled and then reversed after Israel cancelled Netanyahu's trip due to the coming holidays. Now, implementation notes followed quickly. Egypt's foreign minister said that 15 technocrats selected by Palestinian factions, including Hamas, vetted by Israel, would manage Gaza during a transition. We'll see if and when that actually happens. Hamas would not govern in this period because the required bodies were not released on the day that they were supposed to. 15 were supposed to be released on the Monday last week. Israel kept the Rafah border crossing closed and reduced the incoming aid. Despite the violations of the treaty by Hamas, by not returning the bodies as needed, the mediators told Israel that Hamas was trying to locate the bodies with Egyptian and Turkish teams assisting. Al Jazeera cited a senior U.S. official who added that 200 U.S. troops will arrive in Israel to establish a civil-military coordination center to monitor the ceasefire. A parallel center in Gaza will be run by partner states, including private sector individuals, international organizations, and NGO participation. The same official then started talking about what we'll get to much later, which is the executions of the Daumush family members in a blatant violation of Trump's peace plan. Let's go in a little deeply into what this means, what's happening. Hamas is battling with its rivals inside Gaza. Reports described Hamas carrying out public executions of residents accused of collaboration, conducted in front of crowds and under the direction of its internal security apparatus. A Hamas security source told Al Arabiya the group would strike with an iron fist against anyone who disturbs security. In other words, against the clans that are looking to supplant and replace Hamas. Multiple posts said that Hamas executed members of the Daumush clan in central Gaza City. There's reports of over 60 executed. Hamas later buried the son of a senior official of Hamas, Bassem Naim, as well as also a very famous soccer goalie, who was also a member of Hamas, of course, a fighter. They were both killed in clashes with the clan, the Daumush clan, which of course indicates to us that this is not just the Hamas slaughtering them, but there is a bit of conflict. Nevertheless, Hamas is overwhelmingly more powerful and will win if Israel does not interfere. The Daumush Council issued a formal denunciation of Hamas's Sahem unit, accusing it of killing civilians and using resistance, in other words, the Hamas's resistance to Israel, as cover to settle personal scores, while also denying involvement in the killing of a very famous Pallywood journalist with millions of followers who finally got his last ninth death, because I've seen him die multiple times, but apparently he finally died. Good for him, he's a terrorist. They are also claiming that their clan has over 700 martyrs and thus are doing their part in the resistance against Israel, and they're calling for a tribal conclave, vowing not to stay silent on this matter. Additionally, clashes spread beyond Gaza City. Sources reported that Hamas's Sahem unit moved to confront the Abu Samra clan in Dir el-Balla. Exchanges of fire were also reported in the north. The militia leader Ashraf al-Mansi appeared on video rejecting the claim that his forces were hit and asserted control. Yasser al-Shabab's Rafah militia is also described as fully operational, similar to al-Mansi's, and Hossein al-Astal, a 50-year-old militia leader in Khan Yunis, told the N12 news channel that Hamas's threats and propaganda are nonsense and urged the public not to fear Hamas, saying that they were on the ground and Hamas is finished. Now, it's worth noting that all three of those militias hold grounds in the areas where the IDF still operates. So we will have to see what happens if and when the IDF withdraws, which we'll also talk about a little bit more. Nevertheless, the reports describe the broad Hamas purge campaign against the clan-based militias, with death penalty warnings for collaborators and the executions, which we mentioned in the Sabra camp, clashes with the Kalas clan in Sejaiya, firefights, as mentioned, with Al-Mansi in the north. Seems like there's a lot of chaos. A lot of people were killed, others surrendered, and the entire Majeda clan in Khan Yunis publicly pledged loyalty to Hamas and handed over their arms. Hamas's Sahem, that is arrow and deterrent units, warned that there will be no place for lawbreakers, and the Interior Ministry offered general amnesty for clan members who were not involved in murder or serious crimes, allowing those who surrendered by today, Sunday, to organize their legal status. Meanwhile, Mahmoud Abbas's office, that is Abu Mazen, president of the PA, issued a sharp condemnation of Hamas's executions without fair trials, calling them heinous and unacceptable. France and Germany's foreign ministries also condemned the executions in the strongest terms. Donald Trump at first belittled it, saying the Hamas killed bad guys, so it's no big deal. Later, he said he was looking into it, and now the U.S. warned Hamas and the Arab mediators that Hamas's plan for large-scale violence against their people is an unacceptable breach of the current deal, and actions will be taken if they proceed. Let's move on to the application of the hostage swap and what's next. Over the last week, 20 live hostages were released. For the first time since 2014, no terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip is holding a live hostage. 8 bodies were transferred in 2 batches, 4 on Monday and 4 on Tuesday. Of those 8, 7 were deceased hostages and 1 was a Gaza resident, which at first it was thought that it was an error, but it turned out that it was trickery. Hamas says that he was Israeli collaborator and dressed him up in an IDF uniform as in a cruel and unpleasant sign to others to not betray them. Israel, of course, obviously does not count him as one of our Israeli hostages. In any case, this was a blatant violation because 15 bodies were supposed to have been returned on Monday on the first day. Consequently, Israel is reviewing its responses, considering sanctions, and currently the Rafah border crossing is closed and will remain closed, and the entering aid is considerably reduced from the 600 trucks that were supposed to enter daily. That said, Israel is very much against this method of pulse releasing, returning the bodies in small amounts, one by one. This is what this whole deal was supposed to stop, as since then another body and then 2 bodies and then 2 more bodies were released. So the number is growing, but it's still trickling in, and there's quite 16 more that need to be returned. We know that Hamas is lying because after Israel provided the location for some of the fallen, then magically Hamas finds more bodies. This is after Hamas lies and says they're unable to find the bodies themselves. So, 1 week in, the Israeli assessments are that 20 live hostages returned, nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners were released. Of them, 250 are life-termers, who of course have much blood on their hands. And 12 hostage bodies have been returned, with 16 that still need to be returned. The IDF has redeployed across the yellow line. It's a new concept. We've had the blue and the green in the past. Now we have yellow. controlling just over 50% of the Gaza Strip, including Rafah, parts of Khan Yunis, and the north, as well as the Philadelphia corridor. Hamas has pockets that are encircled, and Hamas is intensifying its control in the zone. Large-scale aid is not yet coming in, but some aid is, and Rafah border crossing will at some point open for two-way movement, subject to Israeli approval, with EU monitoring and a Palestinian presence at the terminal, reportedly at Egypt's insistence. Talks on Phase 2, that is demilitarization and disarmament, have not yet started, even though the Wall Street Journal says otherwise. And Hamas says it will not disarm. Trump and Netanyahu publicly insist the opposite. Due to Hamas's deceptions and refusal to live up to their end of the bargain regarding returning the remains, Defense Minister Israel Katz has directed the IDF to prepare a comprehensive plan to decisively defeat Hamas if and probably when the war resumes. Now, let's move on to some regional news. In Lebanon, President Joseph Aoun said the regional mood is one of compromise and that Beirut should engage in negotiations with Israel, citing the maritime border deal as precedent. In a briefing reported by Ashrak al-Awsat, he said there is no escape from negotiations, warning that staying out risks further war, death, and displacement. He expressed hope Israel would halt strikes and said the character and timing of talks would be set in due course. Some reports frame this as conditional on a halt to strikes. Others framed it as an announcement that the talks are opening. Beirut-based sources, not part of these remarks, suggested that the reconstruction funding for Lebanon may hinge on Hezbollah disarmament, implying that Gulf money remains closed while Hezbollah rules. In Indonesia, President Prabowo Subianto was slated for a historic surprise visit to Israel after reports it was arranged by pressure from US and President Trump. It was leaked, and consequently Jakarta panicked. And despite some denials, it said that it could still happen, but obviously it didn't. Channel 14 News blamed the leak and the fact that it didn't happen on a leak from Channel 12, and said that it is completely irresponsible to have such leaks which change the politics of the region. A pro-Hezbollah channel denounced the idea as a Sunni sellout. Additionally to that, a hastily planned visit from Cyprus president to Israel was also canceled. We don't know why. Syria-Russia ties have also featured recently. Syria's president, Ashara, visited Russia and told Putin that Damascus seeks to renew strategic ties, especially with Russia, citing Russian inputs in food production and energy stations built on Russian expertise. He pledged to honor prior agreements while safeguarding independence, territorial unity, and security. They discussed the former Russian bases in Syria. Additionally, Mahmoud Ashara requested, that Russia extradite former president of Syria Bashar al-Assad, who is currently residing in Russia and under their protection. Moving on to Pakistan, it's been very volatile there. The Pakistan-Afghan border had heavy clashes which killed over 60 fighters, as well as having civilian casualties. And of course, that closed the borders. There was some behind-the-scene diplomacy which led to a 48-hour ceasefire, with Kabul calling for Saudi-Qatari mediation. And it's worth mentioning that the Pakistani strikes were actually in Kabul, the Afghan capital. So even though there's a temporary truce, which so far seems to be holding, despite some breaks in it, like an Afghan suicide bombing, we're hoping that that part will work itself out, even though, as I've often done in the past, I'll quote Golda Meir saying, "Good luck to both sides." On the Houthi front, after a few months of speculation, the Houthis admitted that Israel killed their chief of staff a few months ago, but we will have to see how that if that changes the situation in the area. With the current changes in Gaza, the Houthi threats seem to have lessened, but they are, as always, saying that if the situation doesn't improve in Gaza, they will go back to striking. So that's the picture for now. There's peace on paper, but pressure on the ground, and the region is recalibrating in real time. If you found this helpful, tap subscribe and share. New briefings drop regularly. And if you have a source or a correction, leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next update. Shalom.